My name is Vivian Sterling, and for nearly 7 decades, my identity was defined by service. Service to my community as a registered nurse, service to my late husband Arthur, and relentless service to my 2 successful children. I live in a modest but impeccably kept ranch house in Sarasota, Florida, a town known for its retirees and relentless sunshine. Arthur passed 4 years ago, leaving me with a fully paid-off house, a comfortable life insurance policy, and my life savings totaling $850,000, invested carefully in blue-chip stocks. My son, Gregory, is the reason I stayed in Florida. He's a charismatic, high-rolling real estate developer in Miami, always chasing the next multi-million-dollar condo project. He is married to Isabella, a former pageant queen who now runs a luxury lifestyle blog. Their world is one of fast cars, designer clothes, and constant social media performance. A stark contrast to my quiet life. My daughter, Melissa, an environmental consultant, lives a sensible life in Seattle. Her calls are a lifeline, but her distance means she rarely witnesses the subtle, continuous draining of my resources by Gregory and Isabella. My retirement, my time for peace and perhaps a long-delayed photography class, has instead been annexed by Gregory's convenience. I became the emergency childcare for their 2 young daughters, the last-minute caterer for Isabella's influencer events, and the all-hours emotional support when Gregory's ambitious deals inevitably ran into trouble. I was the reliable, invisible force behind their glamorous facade. The real shift began 3 years ago, shortly after Arthur's passing. Gregory, invoking his Yale law degree, insisted on managing my investment portfolio. "Mom, you shouldn't worry about the market volatility. I have access to private funds and exclusive insights through my network. I can grow this money exponentially for you." I agreed, flattered by his focus and trusting his expertise. That trust was cemented when, following Arthur's will, I agreed to sign over my house deed, adding both Gregory and Melissa's names as joint tenants for smooth probate and tax efficiency. It felt like a formality. It felt like family. For years, Gregory sent me polished, jargon-filled reports showing steady growth. I felt secure, proud of my son's acumen. The reality was a carefully constructed lie. The wake-up call came last spring. I was planning to celebrate my 70th birthday with a small, intimate trip, a 2-week safari in Kenya, a dream Arthur and I never fulfilled. The cost was $20,000. I called Gregory to inform him I needed to liquidate a small portion of the investments. $20,000? "Of course, Mom," he replied, a hint of impatience in his voice. "I'll have my assistant send you the papers. Just sign and return." A week later, the statement arrived, tucked into the requested withdrawal forms. My eyes scanned the familiar company names, then landed on the terrifying total, $188,340. My $850,000 portfolio was gone. Nearly $660,000 had vanished. My hands trembled as I dialed his number. He let it go to voicemail. I called Isabella. She texted back, "Busy, Vivian. Try Greg later." When Gregory finally called hours later, his tone was defensive, immediately dismissive of my rising panic. "What's the big emergency, Mom?" "I'm in the middle of closing the Coral Towers deal." "The emergency is my life savings, Gregory. What happened to the money?" "The statement says only $188,000 is left." "Where are the rest of the funds?" He sighed dramatically, the sound amplified by the phone, a sound of profound parental inconvenience. "Mom, please don't be hysterical. It's complex. I leveraged a significant portion of the capital to fund a high-yield bridge loan for one of my development partners. It was an unsecured loan, very aggressive, but the projected return was 30%. We had a few delays, and the loan is now temporarily illiquid. It's just tied up in assets right now." "Tied up? You mean you took $660,000 of my money and gambled it on an unsecured business deal?" My voice was raw, the nurse's calm replaced by a mother's rage. The truth spilled out, cold and hard. He hadn't been investing it for me. He had been using it as his personal slush fund. He needed quick capital for his deals to impress investors, and my secure, unmonitored account was the perfect source. The high-yield investment was his own struggling business, using his mother's retirement to keep his empire from collapsing. "I need my money back, Gregory." "I need my security!" "I am 70 years old. Stop it, Mom, you're being dramatic. I'm good for it. I'll pay you back. I'll liquidate the loan when the Coral Towers deal closes. You have the house. You're fine. Honestly, why do you even need $20,000? To look at lions? He laughed, a short, humorless bark. I'll wire you the $20,000 from my own funds, but you need to stop asking these questions. You're compromising my focus. You are causing me stress, Mom. He hung up, leaving me standing in the center of my quiet living room, the weight of his betrayal crushing the breath from my lungs. The $20,000 arrived 2 days later, a paltry sum compared to the fortune he had vaporized. It felt like a bribe, a silencing payment. The final insult, the trigger that flipped the switch from heartbroken mother to ruthless adversary, came a month later. Isabella's blog was abuzz with a massive, exclusive announcement: the Miami social event of the year, Gregory's 43rd birthday party. They were flying in celebrity chefs, securing a live orchestra, and renting out a private yacht in the Keys for a 3-day celebration. The cost, according to the whispers in my small social circle, was well over $100,000. My children were spending my future on a decadent performance of their present. And once again, I was not invited. I saw a picture on the blog of Isabella choosing the custom caviar service. The caption read, "Gregory deserves nothing less than the absolute best." I looked out at my perfectly maintained Florida yard. This house, my security, was legally tied to a son who saw me as an endless ATM. I was left with a diminished bank account and a deed that prevented me from selling the only substantial asset I had left. The quiet woman who endured decades of family drama died that afternoon. I did not reply to the automated, generic email invitation that finally arrived days later, likely sent by an assistant. I picked up my phone and made the call. "Hello, Mr. Alistair, it's Vivian Sterling. You handled Arthur's estate, correct? I need a lawyer, a very aggressive one. I need to know the fastest, most painful way to sever joint tenancy on a Florida property. I believe my son Gregory is about to receive a birthday present he won't soon forget." My immediate need was clarity and leverage. Arthur Alistair, a formidable old-school estate attorney in downtown Sarasota, reviewed my documents with cold efficiency. "Vivian, what Gregory did is unethical, and potentially a breach of fiduciary duty. But proving criminal intent in these private investment dealings is difficult. Your best leverage is the house," Arthur stated, tapping the deed. "You have a clear path here, but it's brutal. Since the property is held in joint tenancy, any one party can sever the joint ownership and convert it to tenancy in common, meaning the shares become distinct, and you can force a sale. This is called a severance of joint tenancy." He explained the process. "A unilateral document, signed and filed, changes the legal structure, giving me the right to demand a partition action, a court-ordered sale of the property. The moment Gregory receives notice of the severance, his world shifts. He risks a public auction of his interest in the house, which would be disastrous for his credit and his professional image. That is the threat. That is the leverage we use to get your money back." The goal was not to sell the house, but to force a negotiation on my terms. I gave Arthur the order to proceed. The legal document was filed with the county that very afternoon. I was signing away the simple inheritance structure I had built for my children, trading it for a battlefield, but I knew I had no other choice. The next afternoon, the legal papers, a formal notice of severance, were delivered by courier to Gregory's office in Miami. My phone started ringing relentlessly shortly after 3 p.m. Gregory, Isabella, calls and texts. "Mom, what is this nonsense? This is a mistake. You need to call me now." "Vivian, you're threatening the financial stability of your own grandchildren. Think about what you are doing." That was Isabella, the master manipulator. I did not answer. I went to the garden and started pulling weeds, grounding myself in the Florida earth, ignoring the digital chaos. Finally, a desperate voicemail from Gregory, his lawyer's composure shattered. "Mom, you have ruined everything. I have major loans dependent on my asset portfolio, and this will destroy my credit rating. You can't sell that house. That is my equity. I promise I will pay you back. Just stop this action." My only response, as instructed by Arthur, was a single, emotionless text sent late that evening. All matters regarding the property are now exclusively handled by my legal counsel, Arthur Allister. Do not contact me directly. The following morning, Arthur called me. He's hired a shark from Miami. They are furious. Gregory offered to pay you back $100,000 immediately if you would reverse the severance. No, Arthur. The demand is the full principal amount, $850,000, plus 5 years of interest at the current average market rate for the period, which you calculate, and he must sign a document surrendering all his claim to the house. He has until the day before his yacht party to agree to the full terms. After that, we file the partition suit and the house goes to auction. I paused, looking at the yacht party invitation on my desk. And Arthur, I need you to book me a first-class ticket to the Keys for the day of his party. I plan to attend. The 2 weeks that followed the filing of the severance of joint tenancy were the longest, quietest, and most empowering of my life. I hadn't changed my phone number, but I'd set Gregory and Isabella's calls to automatically silence. My world was now small, focused, and entirely mine. I spent my days reading old novels, gardening with a furious new intensity, and having detailed, strategic calls with Arthur Allister. Arthur was everything Gregory pretended to be. Sharp, utterly discreet, and devastatingly effective. He was the sword I needed. He had calculated the total demand, $850,000 principal, plus 5 years of compound interest at a conservative market rate of 6%, bringing the total to just over $1.13 million. This staggering figure represented not just the money Gregory had misused, but the lost opportunity for growth, the years of security he had erased. The interest is the ethical punishment. Vivian, Arthur explained over the phone, it shows we aren't just trying to get the principal back. We are recovering the value of the 5 years of security he stole from you. He understands this language of finance. Gregory, predictably, began a frantic campaign of legal and emotional warfare. His attorney, a high-powered shark named Brenda Hess from a top Miami firm, first tried to intimidate Arthur, arguing that the severance was procedurally flawed, and the interest demand was extortionate. Arthur merely filed the preliminary motion for the partition action, stating that if the agreement wasn't finalized in 10 days, the house would be listed for a court-compelled sale. This was the first true squeeze. Gregory's world was built on leverage, and Arthur was demonstrating that his own mother now held all of it. A forced sale would expose his financial distress to his network, his business partners, and most critically, to the lenders who believed he was liquid and independently wealthy. Isabella was deployed next. She didn't call. She showed up at my house unannounced one Tuesday morning, pulling her gleaming white Mercedes G-Wagon right up onto my lawn. She looked perfect, dressed in pristine tennis whites, her eyes wide and wet, a performance for the neighborhood. "Vivian, what are you doing?" she cried, marching up my front walk. "You look wonderful. Why are you letting that awful old man Arthur poison your mind?" I opened the door just wide enough to speak, standing with my arms crossed, a solid barrier. The only person who poisoned anything, Isabella, was Gregory, when he chose to gamble my life savings on his ego. "Oh, the money. We've told you it's tied up. It's an investment. He offered you $100,000 immediately and you turned it down. That's pure spite, Vivian. This is not about the money. This is about control. You're punishing him because he's successful." "No," I corrected, my voice level and quiet, a chilling contrast to her histrionics. "This is about consequences. And the consequence of taking $850,000 from your mother's retirement is paying back $1.13 million. That is the new price." Isabella's face contorted, dropping the distressed mother-in-law facade for a flash of genuine, ugly rage. "You really are a piece of work, aren't you? A selfish, resentful old woman who can't stand to see her own son surpass her. If you sell this house, do you know what it will do to us? Do you know the scandal we will face? Gregory will never speak to you again. You will be completely alone. I have been alone for 4 years, Isabella. I simply didn't realize it until now. You two made me feel lonely in a full house. I will be far less lonely when I am financially secure." I closed the door gently but firmly. I heard her curse, a harsh, low sound, before the roar of the G-Wagon engine receded. It was the last time either of them tried to communicate directly. The pressure cooker was working. Arthur relayed their next counteroffer. Gregory would pay the $850,000 principal, but only if I signed a legally binding affidavit stating that I gifted him the interest amount and would never discuss the matter publicly. He wants his public image back, Vivian. That affidavit is his life insurance policy, Arthur noted. Tell him the affidavit is a non-starter, and tell him that the deadline for the full amount is in 6 days. After that, I instruct you to file the partition suit. No extensions. No exceptions. The days crept by. Gregory's birthday was scheduled for Saturday, June 20th, a lavish sunset cruise on a yacht chartered from a Key West marina. The event, Isabella had meticulously advertised, was the pinnacle of Miami's social exclusivity. My deadline was Friday, June 19th. I booked my own travel arrangements. Not to Miami, but directly to Key West. I secured a small, quiet hotel room near the marina. I confirmed with Arthur that the funds had not been wired yet. The clock was ticking down to the final hours. On Thursday, 2 days before the party, Arthur called, his voice tight with anticipation. Vivian, they've cracked. Gregory's lawyer, Brenda, just called. She said he's had an emergency meeting with his lenders. They got wind of the potential partition suit and are calling in a significant line of credit. He is facing total financial ruin if this goes public. They are agreeing to the full demand, $130,000, plus a complete notarized transfer of his 1/3 interest in the Sarasota house back to you. A profound silence filled the line. It wasn't triumph I felt, but a deep, icy satisfaction. It was justice. When can the wire transfer be initiated, Arthur? They're demanding that we sign the settlement agreement first, and you execute the paperwork reversing the severance. Absolutely not. You know the rule. Money first, then the paperwork. The wire must clear my account before 5 p.m. tomorrow, Friday, and only then will you send the signed documents to his lawyer. He wants to save his party? He pays the ransom first. Understood, Vivian. That is aggressive, but fair given the circumstances. We have them where we want them. Now, what about your 1/3 share of the house? I had a separate, unexpected meeting scheduled for Friday morning, just hours before the wire transfer deadline. Tell Gregory he can keep the house if he agrees to the settlement. But my daughter Melissa still owns a 1/3 share, and I have a very specific plan for that third, Arthur. My freedom is secured. Now it's time to secure hers. Friday morning, the day of reckoning, was bright and clear. The settlement funds had not yet landed in my account. I was on edge but strangely calm. I had a small, private conference call scheduled with Melissa in Seattle. Melissa, my daughter, was the sensible one, the kind heart. But years of distance and Gregory's deliberate manipulation had led her to believe in his financial genius. She was completely unaware of the drama that had unfolded. Mom, you sound different, Melissa said when she answered the call. Arthur Alastair sent me a package of documents. He said it was urgent regarding the Sarasota house deed. What is going on? I took a deep breath. Melissa, I need to tell you the truth about Gregory. I told her everything. The lie about the investments, the missing $850,000, his use of my retirement to float his business deals, the panic over the partition threat, and the final settlement amount. I left nothing out. There was a long silence on the line. Then I heard a quiet sob. Mom, I had no idea. He always made it sound like you were a millionaire, that the portfolio was performing beautifully. He always told me you were just helping him with a temporary cash flow issue. He manipulated us both, sweetheart. But he used my funds. He also used your good name. When your father put your name on the deed, it was a gift. When Gregory used it, it was a shield. I explained my plan for her 1/3 interest. In the settlement, Gregory is surrendering his share to me. This means the ownership structure will be 66% me and 33% you. But I want your share back, Melissa. I want you to have the money you deserve. Money that is clean and untainted by Gregory's greed. I don't want it. Mom, you need it more than I do. I have my principal back, and the interest, which is more than enough for my security. But I need you to sign one more document. Arthur has prepared a deed of trust for your 1/3 share. If you sign it, your share is immediately sold to me at the current market value of your 1/3 portion, about $180,000. And that money, Melissa, will be wired into a private account in your name. That money is your father's final gift to you, free of your brother's influence. Why are you doing this, Mom? You could keep it. Because I love you and you deserve a clean slate. Because I am done being blackmailed by a selfish son. And because I want you to look at that deed and know you are finally free from your brother's debt. There was another long pause. Okay, Mom, I'll sign, but only if you promise to take that trip to Kenya. It's already booked. Sweetheart. First class. The final wire transfer arrived at 4:45 p.m., 15 minutes before the deadline. When $30,000 had landed in my account, immediately wired $180,000 to Melissa's new private account in Seattle. At 4:50 p.m., Arthur Alastair electronically filed the final settlement documents. Gregory was officially out of the deed, and my savings were replenished, complete with a massive penalty interest. At 5:30 p.m., I put a note on my refrigerator, a simple reminder. Call Clara. Wish her a wonderful Saturday. Then I packed my bag, not with summer dresses for a yacht party, but with a sleek black evening gown I hadn't worn in 20 years, and the most expensive pair of sunglasses I owned. I had secured my financial freedom. Now it was time for the final act of my liberation, the public surrender of Gregory's last shred of dignity. I drove straight to the Sarasota airport. My private itinerary was simple, first class to Key West. My son's massive, extravagant birthday party was scheduled to start at 7 p.m. the following evening. Gregory thought he had bought his silence and saved his reputation with a painful wire transfer. He was wrong. He'd only bought me a front-row seat to his downfall. I arrived in Key West on Saturday morning, the day of Gregory's extravagant 43rd birthday cruise. The air was thick with heat, salt, and the faint, sweet smell of possibility. I checked into a small, inconspicuous boutique hotel near the marina, far from the opulence I knew Gregory and Isabella would be flaunting. The entire day was an exercise in calculated anticipation. I didn't contact Arthur, nor did I check my bank balance again. The money was secure, the legal battle won. Now was the time for the personal victory. I spent the afternoon at a local salon, getting my silver hair styled into a sleek, modern bob, and allowing a skilled makeup artist to transform the face that had spent too many years looking stressed and available. The black evening gown I wore was a vintage Dior from a trunk I hadn't opened since Arthur's last formal work event. It was simple, elegant, and demanded attention. I looked less like a retired nurse, and more like a woman who owned her own destiny. My plan was precise, relying entirely on Gregory's fatal flaw, his obsession with public image. He had paid a king's ransom to ensure silence and avoid scandal. My task was to make him understand that the price of silence is only valid until the contract is signed, and I had signed nothing agreeing to attend his party silently. The event was scheduled for 7 p.m. I arrived at the Azure Dream Marina dock at 7:15 p.m., perfectly late. The scene was exactly as Isabella had advertised, a dazzling spectacle. The Azure Dream was a massive 3-deck yacht, glittering with string lights. A jazz quartet played softly on the deck, and a throng of beautiful, expensively dressed guests mingled, sipping champagne. I recognized a few prominent Miami faces, rival real estate developers, local political figures, and a handful of recognizable social media influencers, Isabella's core audience. This wasn't a party. It was a networking event disguised as a celebration, a desperate showcase of Gregory's supposedly rock-solid success. I presented my belated, slightly crumpled invitation to the young man checking names at the end of the gangplank. He was confused. Mrs. Sterling. I don't see your name on the final list, ma'am. I can call Mr. Vance. Nonsense, I stated, my voice low and authoritative, the kind of voice that made subordinates obey. I am Vivian Sterling, Gregory's mother. I was a late addition. Just note my name and let me pass. I don't want to make a scene. The sheer force of my presence and my expensive dress worked. He hesitated, then nervously nodded me through. As I stepped onto the main deck, I paused. My eyes immediately found Gregory and Isabella. They were standing near the stern, bathed in the glow of the sunset and surrounded by a group of laughing guests. Gregory, immaculate in a custom white linen suit, looked triumphant and relieved. He clearly believed the crisis of the last 2 weeks was entirely behind him. He was in the middle of a grand toast when I walked up to the bar and asked for a glass of the vintage champagne. I didn't approach them. I simply stood still, allowing the ripple of recognition to spread through the crowd. The first to see me was Isabella. Her smile froze on her face, contorting into an expression of sheer horror. She nudged Gregory sharply. Gregory turned. His confident party host expression melted instantly, replaced by a ghastly pallor. It was the look of a man who thought he had buried a body only to see it appear at his dinner table. He abandoned his toast mid-sentence and rushed toward me, dragging Isabella behind him. "Mom! What are you doing here?" he hissed, pulling me urgently toward a shadowy corner behind a large floral arrangement. "We settled everything. You signed the papers. You got your money. You promised silence." "I promised Arthur I would sign the release papers after the wire transfer cleared," I corrected, adjusting the Dior carefully. "Arthur handled the legal paperwork of the settlement, Gregory. I handled the travel arrangements for the celebration. This isn't funny. Look around, Mom. These are my clients, my lenders. You are putting me at risk." Isabella, regaining a fraction of her composure, attempted a desperate maneuver. She forced a strained smile. "Vivian, darling, what a surprise. We thought you were still, gardening. Come, let me introduce you to the CEO of—" I gently placed my hand on Isabella's perfectly manicured arm, my grip firm. My gaze was fixed on Gregory, but my voice carried just enough to turn a few nearby heads. "No, thank you, Isabella. I'm not here to network. I'm here to give Gregory his birthday gift." The word gift hung in the air, drawing a curious crowd. Gregory's eyes were wide with rising panic. He knew, with a lawyer's terrifying certainty, that his mother was about to perform an unforgivable act of public exposure. "Mom, please, let's talk about this privately," he pleaded, his voice a desperate whisper. I ignored him, my voice rising slightly, clear and authoritative, addressing the small gathering of curious developers and influencers who had drawn closer. "I apologize for interrupting the festivities," I began, raising my champagne flute just enough to command attention. But as Gregory's mother, I felt it was crucial to deliver my son's present myself, right here, right now, among the people who truly understand his worth. Gregory tried to grab my arm. "Stop it, Mom. I'm warning you." I smoothly stepped away, keeping my expression serene. This gift is a demonstration of exactly how much Gregory values his reputation, the reputation he has worked so hard to build in this city. I then looked directly at a well-known financier standing closest to us. "Ladies and gentlemen, you see before you a very successful man, my son, Gregory Vance. You see this fabulous yacht, this exquisite party, this demonstration of his immense wealth and stability. What you don't see is the foundation this empire was built on." I paused for dramatic effect. The crowd was silent, captivated by the sudden elegant drama. 2 weeks ago, I received a wire transfer of $130,000 from Gregory, I stated clearly. This was not a birthday gift. This was a settlement payment. It was the full repayment of my entire life savings, my retirement fund, which my son borrowed without permission, and then gambled away in a series of unsecured, high-risk real estate deals that left me with barely enough to pay my own property taxes. The effect was instantaneous. A collective gasp swept through the crowd. The jazz quartet stopped playing mid-song. Gregory's face was the color of fresh ash. "She's lying! It's an old woman's spite. She's having a breakdown!" "Am I?" I countered calmly, pulling a small, pristine copy of the settlement receipt from my tiny clutch purse. It showed the 7-figure deposit. I held it up, though only those closest could read it. "This document shows the wire transfer that cleared yesterday afternoon. It proves the debt. It proves the desperation. It proves he paid a penalty of over $280,000 in interest simply to keep the family house from being sold at a court-compelled auction. A forced sale that would have ruined his credit and exposed the true fragility of his finances. Didn't need them to read the exact number. The context was enough. He paid $1 million, not because he loves his mother, but because he was terrified of you all learning the truth. Gregory Vance is not a stable investment." He is a gambler who uses his mother's retirement fund as collateral for his reckless ambition. Isabella finally found her voice, a high-pitched, desperate screech. "Security! Get this mad woman off the yacht now!" But it was too late. The financier I had targeted was already backing away, his face hardening with professional distrust. The rival developers were exchanging knowing, dangerous glances. Isabella's influencer friends were discreetly raising their phones, not to take photos of the party, but to record the implosion. I finished my speech with cold finality, addressing the entire silent yacht. "I'm no longer an investment, Gregory. I am now simply a creditor who has been repaid. The house is legally mine and my security is restored. Happy 43rd birthday, my son. May your next 4 decades be built on your own money." I placed the paper back in my clutch and with a final, serene smile, turned toward the gangplank. Gregory, defeated, stood frozen. Isabella screamed his name, but the noise of his crumbling reputation was louder. As I walked away, I saw the yacht's captain speaking urgently to a crew member. The yacht was still tied to the dock. My revenge had not just ruined the party. It had ground his entire expensive performance to a standstill. No one was getting on or off, and the party was officially dead. I took a taxi directly from the marina back to my hotel. The quiet air conditioning felt luxurious, a stark contrast to the shouting and chaos I had left behind on the Azure Dream dock. I hadn't stayed to watch the full implosion. The single decisive blow was enough. My departure, calm and unchallenged, was the final act of my statement. I was not a participant in their drama. I was the architect of their consequence. Back in my room, I received a short text from Arthur Alastair. Confirmation. Yacht was held by Port Authority due to a contractual dispute over an immediate cancellation clause. They didn't even leave the dock. The Miami Newswire is already asking questions about Vance Development's stability. Flawless execution, Vivian. I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile. Gregory's extravagant display of success had been instantly converted into a viral signal of financial distress. His greatest asset, his carefully curated image, was now his greatest vulnerability. The call from Melissa. The next morning, Sunday, I received the call I had truly been waiting for. It wasn't from Gregory. It was from Melissa in Seattle. "Mom," she began, her voice a mix of awe and shock. I saw the videos. They're everywhere. Miami Gossip has a 10-minute segment. "What in the world did you do?" I recounted the scene on the yacht, skipping the emotional subtext and sticking to the facts. "I did what I had to do, honey. I secured my future." He needed to understand that a mother's financial security isn't his disposable capital. "But Mom, $1.13 million? And you gave me the $180,000 for my share of the house? I can't believe he was doing that. All those years he was managing your money, and he was just..." Melissa trailed off, struggling to put words to the betrayal. He was using the anonymity of family trust to hide his own failures. Now he can't. "You should know, Melissa, he tried to use you as a shield. Isabella said I was threatening the financial stability of my own grandchildren. They try to make the victim feel like the villain." "Well, you're not the villain, Mom. You're the most impressive woman I know. I've already put that money toward a down payment on a small clinic space here. A fresh start. Thank you." Hearing her voice, relieved and empowered, was my true reward. The money was a symbol. The restoration of trust and the freedom of my daughter was the victory. The silent aftermath. I returned to Sarasota late Sunday. My quiet neighborhood was anything but. Mrs. Peterson, the HOA president, cornered me before I even got my suitcase out of the car. "Vivian, we saw the reports. Is it true Gregory Vance is in financial distress? His partner, Mr. Rodriguez, is trying to buy out his interest in the new high-rise. They say he needs quick cash." The local gossip network had done its work faster than any court filing. Gregory's professional world was already dismantling itself. When a developer's reputation for liquidity is compromised, his credit lines dry up overnight. I maintained the same serene composure I had worn on the yacht. "I only know what I read in the papers, Mrs. Peterson. but my own affairs with Gregory are concluded. I have my retirement secured, and I've just regained full ownership of my home. I plan on taking a long, luxurious vacation. I had learned the value of controlled information. I didn't need to elaborate on his ruin. I only needed to showcase my own recovered stability. The final attempt. The first week after the Key West incident was characterized by a cold, desperate silence from Gregory. His lawyer, Brenda Hess, tried to revive the legal battle, threatening a defamation suit. Arthur Allister simply sent a copy of my bank statement, showing the full $130,000 deposit, and the signed settlement papers that explicitly released me from any non-disclosure agreements regarding past events. The defamation threat evaporated. Gregory couldn't sue me for telling the truth about a transaction he had legally ratified. Finally, late Friday afternoon, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. I answered, "Mom, it's Gregory." His voice was flat, hollow, stripped of all arrogance. He sounded truly defeated. "Yes, Gregory, you should address all communication through Arthur, as per the settlement agreement. Forget the lawyers for a second. I just need to know one thing. Why? You got your money back, Mom. You got the house. Why did you have to do that in front of everyone? I lost 3 major investors this week. Coral Towers is stalled. I'm facing margin calls I can't meet. You ruined me." "No, Gregory," I replied, my voice steady, reflecting 4 years of suppressed pain. "You ruined yourself when you decided that my life savings was an acceptable casualty for your down payment. You ruined yourself when you tried to buy my silence for a fraction of what you took. And you ruined yourself when you didn't even send your own mother an invitation to the party she largely paid for." I was going to pay it back. I was just stretched. "You were stretched on my security, Gregory, and that is unforgivable. I gave you trust, and you gave me legal paperwork designed to control me. I simply used the same legal system to secure my freedom. I no longer needed your love, son. I only needed my principal and a penalty." I paused, delivering the final quiet blow. "Arthur has already finalized the transfer of your name off the deed. You are no longer financially connected to this house. Neither are you invited here. I suggest you focus on salvaging what you can of your business and stop relying on other people's assets." I didn't wait for him to respond. I hung up the phone. It was the last time I would ever speak to him. The emotional cord had finally been severed, not by anger, but by a quiet, absolute boundary. I felt a wave of profound sorrow. Sorrow for the loss of the son I had raised, but no regret for the actions I had taken. I was financially secure, legally free, and ready to start the life I had postponed for decades. I walked into my kitchen, looked at the meticulously organized calendar, and circled a date 2 months out, the Kenya safari. The week after my final conversation with Gregory was marked by a quiet, profound cleansing. The absence of their demands, their manipulations, and their transactional love left a vacuum I quickly filled with my own choices. The house now, entirely mine again, Gregory's and Melissa's names legally severed, felt different. It was no longer a resource they might claim, but a sanctuary I had defended. My first act of true freedom was calling my lawyer, Arthur Allister, and giving him his final instructions. "Arthur, the funds are secure. I want to establish a small private trust. It will hold the interest penalty, the $280,000. It's to be used exclusively for a foundation that provides financial literacy and legal counsel to vulnerable seniors against family exploitation. I don't want the money. I want the lesson to continue." Arthur, rarely surprised, was genuinely moved. "That's a powerful legacy, Vivian. Consider it done." My second act was calling Melissa. I told her about the trust and assured her that her own financial security remained paramount. She was thriving. In Seattle, her new clinic a dream realized, built on the clean money I had secured for her. The relationship with my daughter was deeper and more honest than ever before. We had built a new family foundation, one based on respect, not obligation. The fate of the uninvited. The news about Gregory and Isabella traveled quickly through, The Sarasota social circuits, confirming everything I had exposed. His desperate need for cash forced him to make a series of hasty liquidations. The Coral Towers deal, his prestige project, collapsed when his financing partners, spooked by the public scandal, pulled their support. He was forced to sell off assets at fire sale prices to cover his margin calls and outstanding loans. Within 3 months, Gregory and Isabella were forced out of their luxury Miami high-rise. They didn't declare bankruptcy, but their empire was significantly reduced to a salvage operation. Their flawless online presence vanished entirely. Isabella's blog went dark. They moved into a modest, leased condominium, far from the social spotlight they craved. They didn't lose everything, but they lost the status they valued above all else, the very thing I had targeted on the yacht. They had to downsize their ego, and for a man like Gregory, that was the most painful consequence of all. I never heard from either of them again, and I didn't try to contact them. The silence was not loneliness. It was peace. The trip to Kenya. Exactly 2 months after the Key West reckoning, I found myself sitting in a window seat on a Boeing 787, sipping champagne, watching the curvature of the earth. I was on my way to Kenya. The safari was everything Arthur and I had dreamed of. For 2 weeks, I was immersed in the Masai Mara, far from the stress of phone calls, legal threats, and familial demands. I watched lionesses hunt and elephants bathe. I didn't worry about my savings account, my deed, or my children's problems. I was simply Vivian, a woman finally living her own life. On the 3rd day, as the sun dipped below the savanna horizon, painting the sky in violent streaks of orange and purple, I sat on the deck of my luxury tent. I pulled out my small notebook and wrote a final note, the closing chapter of my old life. I thought I was a bad mother for saying no. I thought I was selfish for taking back what was mine. But I realized that the greatest disservice I did to Gregory was never allowing him to fail. I always bailed him out, always provided the security blanket, and in doing so, I taught him that consequences were for other people. My silence after the betrayal was not out of fear, but strategy. My public action was not revenge, but a final, devastating act of tough love, forcing him to face the full market consequence of his dishonesty. The money is back, the house is secure, and I am finally free. A new beginning. When I returned to Sarasota, I wasn't just rested, I was fundamentally changed. The old Vivian, the available, accommodating resource, was gone. I enrolled in Storytime, the photography class I had always wanted, using the beautiful new lens I had bought in Nairobi. I joined a hiking club and started planning a trip to Patagonia with a group of adventurous new friends. I learned to say no without guilt, and yes, only to things that enriched my life. One afternoon, Arthur called me. He said he had received a legal notice from a small, struggling real estate firm in Tampa. Gregory was attempting to start over in a new market, under a different name, trying to rebuild his career from scratch. "What should I do, Vivian?" Arthur asked. I looked out at my perfectly kept yard, the one Gregory was no longer legally entitled to visit. I looked at the framed photos of the savannah from my new hobby. "Nothing, Arthur," I said, a genuine smile in my voice. "He's on his own. He's paying his debt, and I'm living my life. That's the end of the story." I was 72 years old, financially secure, and finally completely free. The money was recovered, but the greatest asset I reclaimed was the undeniable dignity of my own independence.